On July 2nd, 1937, the sun rose over Lae, Papua New Guinea, casting golden light across a dusty airstrip where a silver Lockheed Electra sat waiting. Inside the cockpit, Amelia Earhart checked her instruments one final time. Her hands moved with practiced precision across the controls, but there was something different in her eyes that morning. A heaviness, perhaps, or maybe just exhaustion from 40 days of relentless flying. Her navigator, Fred Noonan, climbed aboard carrying charts rolled under his arm. These weren't ordinary maps. They were covered in his meticulous calculations, lines drawn between stars, angles measured to find their way across an ocean so vast it could swallow them without a trace. Fred had navigated ships across these waters before, but never from 7,000 feet in the air, never moving at 150 miles per hour. The locals gathered to watch the departure. They'd seen many strange things arrive on their shores, but this woman in trousers with short tousled hair, this woman who flew metal birds across impossible distances, she was something entirely new. Children pointed as the engines coughed to life, their roar drowning out the morning birds. Amelia waved from the window, and in that gesture was all the confidence that had made her famous. But confidence and preparation are different things. What nobody watching that takeoff knew, what perhaps even Amelia and Fred didn't fully grasp, was that their journey had already been compromised by a series of small decisions that would compound into disaster. The radio equipment they carried wasn't quite compatible with the ship waiting for them at Howland Island. Someone had assumed. Someone had miscommunicated. Someone had failed to double-check. The Electra lifted off the runway at 10 a.m., heavily laden with fuel. Every available space in the aircraft had been converted into a fuel tank. The cabin smelled of gasoline. The weight made the plane sluggish, reluctant to climb. Amelia coaxed it higher, feeling the tropical air grow cooler as they ascended. Behind them, the green mountains of New Guinea grew smaller, then vanished entirely as they headed out over the Coral Sea. 2,600 miles ahead lay Howland Island. Think about that distance for a moment. If you drove your car at highway speed without stopping, it would take you more than 40 hours to cover that ground. But Amelia and Fred had no roads to follow, no signs to guide them. They had only Fred's calculations, the stars above, and their own skill to find a piece of land 1 mile wide in an ocean covering 64 million square miles. The first hours passed uneventfully. Fred took sightings through the cockpit dome, using his sextant to measure the angle of the sun. Each calculation told them where they were, plotted their position on the endless blue below. Amelia kept the Electra steady at 10,000 feet. Up here, the air was thin and cold, but the engines ran smoothly, drinking fuel at a steady rate. Everything seemed to be going according to plan. But oceans are deceptive, specific, invisible from the ground, barely detectable from the air without modern instruments. Winds can shift directions, slowing progress or pushing aircraft miles off course. And in 1937, there was no satellite view, no radar, no GPS. There was only dead reckoning and hope. As evening approached, Fred noticed something troubling. His celestial navigation depended on seeing stars, but clouds had begun building below them, thick and impenetrable. When he tried to take a sighting on the evening stars, he found his view blocked. He couldn't get a fix on their position. They were flying blind, navigating purely by compass and airspeed, hoping their calculations from hours earlier were still accurate. Amelia glanced at the fuel gauges. The needles had fallen considerably, but that was expected. They'd been in the air for 12 hours. Her body ached from sitting in the same position, from fighting the constant small movements of the control stick. Her eyes burned from staring at instruments. But she'd endured worse. She'd flown the Atlantic alone, fought through storms that would have killed lesser pilots. This was just another challenge. 19 hours into the flight, they should have been close. Fred's calculations put them near Howland Island, but when they looked down, they saw only ocean. Amelia dropped altitude, hoping to spot something, anything. The lower they flew, the more fuel they consumed. It was a gamble, but what choice did they have? They couldn't land on water and survive. The Electra would sink within minutes. That's when Amelia tried to contact the Itasca, the Coast Guard ship waiting near Howland Island. She pressed the transmit button and spoke into the microphone. Her voice was calm, professional, but underneath was an edge of concern. She reported their position, asked for radio direction finding signals, but the reply she expected never came. The Itasca could hear her, but she couldn't hear them. The radio equipment mismatch meant they couldn't establish two-way communication. On the Itasca, radio operators frantically tried to respond. They could hear Amelia's voice growing more urgent with each transmission. They sent signals, hoping she could use them to find her way, but she never acknowledged receiving them. It was like shouting at someone through soundproof glass. You could see them, hear them, but couldn't reach them. The frustration aboard that ship must have been unbearable. Amelia's next transmission was more urgent. She reported they must be on top of Howland Island, but couldn't see it. The sun was rising now, burning off some of the clouds, but still no island appeared. She was flying a search pattern, burning precious fuel with every turn. Fred studied his charts again, rechecking his math, but the numbers didn't lie. They should be here. The island should be right below them. 20 hours and 14 minutes after takeoff, Amelia made her final confirmed transmission. Her voice came through clear but strained. She reported they were running on a line of position, moving north and south because they couldn't find the island. She said they were running low on fuel. And then, at 8:43 a.m. local time, she made one final call. She reported their position again, said they were running north and south, and then silence. The radio operators on the Itasca waited, listening to static, hoping for another transmission. Minutes passed. Then hours. They called out repeatedly, their voices echoing into the void. But Amelia Earhart and Fred Noonan never responded. Somewhere in the vast Pacific, the Electra had vanished. Whether ditched in the ocean, crashed on some unknown island, or met some other fate, nobody knows. What we do know is this. In those final moments, with fuel gauges reading empty, Amelia had to make a choice. Keep searching for Howland Island and risk dropping from the sky when the engines died, or try to reach some other landfall. Maybe she turned northwest toward the Marshall Islands, 800 miles away. Maybe she turned south toward Gardner Island, 300 miles distant. Or maybe she simply kept flying straight, hoping against hope that Howland would appear. Some say the Electra crashed in the ocean near Howland Island and sank immediately. The Pacific at that point is more than 3 miles deep. The wreckage would have fallen through darkness, settling on the seafloor where no light has ever penetrated. In that scenario, Amelia and Fred's bodies are still down there, preserved by the cold and pressure, never to be recovered. It's a lonely thought that America's most famous aviatrix lies in an unmarked grave of water and darkness. Others believe the Electra made it to Gardner Island, now called Nikumaroro. This theory has compelling evidence. Several radio distress signals were picked up in the days after the disappearance, signals that could only have come from a plane on land with its engines running. The signals were triangulated to an area near Gardner Island. One amateur radio operator in Texas, a woman named Mabel Larimore, logged multiple transmissions she believed came from the Electra. In these transmissions, someone reported being on or near Gardner Island. They said water was knee-deep in the plane. They said they were badly hurt. The signals came at irregular intervals, always during low tide when the aircraft wouldn't be submerged. Then, after about 5 days, the signal stopped. Either the radio batteries died, or the Pacific finally claimed the aircraft. If this theory is true, Amelia and Fred survived the crash only to die slowly of exposure, thirst, and injuries on that remote coral atoll. In 1940, British colonists found human bones on Gardner Island. 13 bones in total, discovered under a wren tree. Nearby were a woman's shoe, a sextant box like the one Fred carried, and a Benedictine bottle that might have held brandy. The bones were examined and declared to be from a male, possibly of European or Polynesian descent. They were stored in a box on the island of Fiji, then lost. Gone forever. Impossible to test with modern DNA analysis. But in recent years, Scientists re-examined the measurements taken in 1940. Using modern forensic techniques, they concluded the bones were more consistent with a white female of Amelia's height and build. The shoe matched the type she wore. The Sextant box matched Fred's equipment. And there's more. An aluminum panel found on Gardner Island matches riveting patterns used on the Electra. A piece of plexiglass recovered from the island matches the type used in the aircraft's windows. Then there are the crabs. Gardner Island is home to coconut crabs, enormous creatures that can grow 3 feet across. These crabs are scavengers, and they're known to drag bones into their burrows. Searches of the island have found aircraft metal, buttons from 1930s clothing, and even cosmetics jars that match brands Amelia used. But no more bones. Perhaps the crabs scattered them, dragged them underground, made them impossible to find. A third theory suggests something darker. According to some accounts, the Electra flew northwest and crash-landed in the Japanese-controlled Marshall Islands. Witnesses there claimed they saw a female pilot and male navigator taken prisoner by Japanese forces. Some said they were held on Saipan, that they were interrogated, possibly executed. The theory gained traction when a photograph surfaced showing a woman who might be Amelia on a dock in the Marshall Islands, with what might be the Electra being towed by a Japanese ship, but that photograph was debunked. It was taken in 1935, 2 years before Amelia disappeared. The theory requires believing that Japan would capture and execute an American civilian hero for no clear strategic reason. It requires believing dozens of witnesses who came forward decades later with convenient memories. Most historians dismiss this theory as fantasy, but it persists because people want to believe Amelia didn't simply vanish. They want her story to have an ending, even a tragic one. The most likely explanation remains the simplest. The Electra ran out of fuel somewhere near Howland Island. Amelia ditched in the ocean, and the aircraft sank quickly. She and Fred drowned or died on impact. Their bodies were never recovered because the Pacific is simply too vast, too deep, too unforgiving. Search aircraft flew over the area for weeks after the disappearance, covering thousands of square miles. They found nothing. No debris, no oil slicks, no sign that an aircraft had ever been there. Think about the irony of it all. Amelia Earhart was famous for being the first woman to fly solo across the Atlantic. She'd conquered that ocean, tamed it, shown the world that women could do anything men could do. But the Pacific is different. The Pacific doesn't care about courage or skill or determination. It's simply too big, too empty, too indifferent to human ambition. In the weeks after the disappearance, newspapers around the world carried the story on their front pages. Radio broadcasts interrupted regular programming to report updates. President Roosevelt authorized the largest air and sea search in history at that time. 9 ships and 66 aircraft searched 250,000 square miles of ocean. They found nothing. The search was called off after 2 weeks. The official conclusion was that the Electra had crashed in the ocean and sank. But Amelia's husband, George Putnam, never accepted that conclusion. He funded private searches for years. He followed up every lead, every rumor, every supposed sighting. He died in 1950, still searching, still hoping. In his final years, he told friends he believed Amelia had survived the crash, had lived for some time as a castaway, had died alone, knowing nobody was coming to rescue her. It haunted him until his death. Fred Noonan's wife, Mary, also refused to believe they'd simply vanished. She pointed out that Fred was one of the world's best navigators, that he'd crossed the Pacific dozens of times on Pan Am flying boats. She insisted he wouldn't have gotten lost, that something else must have happened. But what? Nobody could answer that question. Nobody can answer it today. Over the decades, expeditions have searched for the Electra. Robert Ballard, who found the Titanic, searched the waters around Howland Island using deep-sea submersibles. He found nothing. The International Group for Historic Aircraft Recovery has conducted numerous expeditions to Gardner Island, finding tantalizing artifacts but no definitive proof. A company called Ocean Infinity used autonomous underwater vehicles to scan hundreds of square miles of seafloor. Nothing. The Mystery endures because Amelia Earhart represents something more than just a pilot. She was a symbol of possibility, of breaking barriers, of refusing to accept limitations. When she vanished, part of America's optimism vanished with her. The 1930s were hard years, depression years, and Amelia offered hope. Her disappearance felt like that hope dying, sinking beneath cold waves, never to resurface. But perhaps the mystery is fitting. Perhaps it's right that we don't know what happened in those final moments. Amelia spent her life pushing boundaries, exploring the unknown, going places others feared to go. In the end, she went somewhere we still can't follow. She crossed a boundary we can't yet cross, into a place that keeps its secrets. And maybe, in some strange way, that's exactly how she would have wanted it. Not forgotten, never forgotten, but forever just beyond our reach, forever flying into mystery.